So, where do we begin this new phase of our relationship? You and I. Some of us know one another as friends, some as acquaintances, others through service or as names on a page. But how do we grow together, each of us secure in our many roles? We're here tonight because many of us share some core beliefs. You can see it in our community's mission statement. Congregation Emanu is a Reformed synagogue firmly rooted in our covenant with God and the Jewish people. We are a caring community dedicated to inspiring the love of God, teaching the joy of Jewish living, and sharing our mission to be a light unto the nations. The Reform movement, while not always of one mind on issues, provides another example of common ground for us. The preamble to the 1999 Pittsburgh Convention of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, Statement of Principles for Reform Judaism, said, "The great contribution of Reform Judaism is that it has enabled the Jewish people to introduce innovation while preserving tradition, to embrace diversity while asserting commonality, to affirm beliefs without rejecting those who doubt, and to bring faith to sacred texts without sacrificing critical scholarship. This statement of principles affirms the central tenets of Judaism, God, Torah, and Israel, even as it acknowledges the diversity of Reform Jewish beliefs and practices." These core beliefs and our presence here bespeak a mutual standing we as congregants often cite. I belong to Emmanuel. What might that statement imply? Knowing what values we share can be a meaningful first step down the path for us, before each of us decides what we wish to do to deepen our mutual connections. As you have honored me by placing me in the position of president, it's incumbent on me to first open up to you. I love baseball. I have since my dad took me to the Buff Stadium off the Gulf Freeway to watch the Houston Buffs in the mid to late 50s. I enjoyed and agonized with the Buffs, the Colt 45s, in their mosquito-infested sweatbox of a pre-Astrodome stadium, and the Astros. My grandparents on both sides were in Boston, where I saw my first Major League game at Fenway Park. Until just a few years ago, I played softball locally. I learned loyalty, that progress can be slow, and success can be elusive and fleeting. Carrie Leaf, in a piece for URJ entitled, "There's Something About Baseball and Judaism, but What Is It?" wrote, "Baseball requires the contribution of each individual player and the collective work of the team. We accomplish more together." My parents, Belle and Erwin Basson of blessed memory, joined this neighborhood synagogue in the mid-50s, enrolling me in our religious school, a little early for Dolores. The team of teachers, rabbis, and others taught Hebrew, Israel, holidays, and observances, and prepared me for bar mitzvah. I stood on the box, is it still here? At the pulpit, apparently successfully doing my part. My bar mitzvah partner, Alan Winter of blessed memory, and I robed the young men whose turn would come next, saying, "We represent the boys who have been bar mitzvah before you. We wore these robes with pride, and we shall always remember the day we entered Judaism of our own free will. These robes symbolize your increasing responsibilities to the teaching of our faith. May they be for you also mantles of Jewish learning and pride in your temple." The notions of responsibility and pride in the temple apparently stuck with me. Fortunately, the dated gender language did not. For the record, our diligent archivist, Maxine Reingold, informed me that the first Emmanuel Bas Mitzvah, as it was then referred to, was Theba Jean Gold on May 3rd, 1947. A little more baseball and Judaism. Partnering to make the world a place of justice, compassion, wholeness, and joy, a very Jewish practice, requires so much of what baseball teaches: good humor, tenacity, building on memory, commitment, dynamism, passion, and teamwork. I heard in Rabbi Kahn's sermons and in the worship service the call for social justice, one which profoundly influenced my personal and professional growth. After graduating Tulane University in psychology, eventually, took a while, I received my master's degree in industrial organizational psychology from the University of Houston. Ed Kahn was there receiving his PhD. He can vouch for it. When it became clear to me that daily corporate life and consulting were not my passion, social justice beckoned. I moved serendipitously onto a path that would take me into what was referred to as the battered women's movement. I created Texas' first family violence specialized adult probation caseload in 1981 at a time when Poppy Northcutt, Toby Myers, and Rondi Gerson were blazing trails locally and nationally in raising awareness and changing institutions. 3 years later, I received funding from the Hogg Foundation to establish a comprehensive domestic violence intervention program at Family Service Center. Having volunteered earlier at the Houston Area Women's Center Shelter, I also did so for a number of local groups and for the Texas Council on Family Violence, where I chaired the legislative task force. And as their first male board member, I learned to be quiet, to listen, and not to assume I either had or should have all the answers. I was privileged to contribute to making a difference in many lives. But the best part of that time in my life was meeting my future partner, Karen. She was in Austin, funded in grad school also by the Hogg Foundation, working toward her doctorate. Indeed, she carried the unlikely title, Hogg Fellow. And yet, as part of her job, she visited the program the foundation was supporting. Having a mutual interest in program evaluation, we co-wrote a grant to Hogg that subsequently was funded. Later in 1987, we worked together and fell in love. We were married in 1990, and our daughter Emma Rose was born in 1994. I'm convinced that the best outcome ever from a Hogg Foundation grant is Emma. After staying home that first year with Emma, I entered the nonprofit social service arena as executive director at Houston Advocates for Mentally Ill Children, now Child Builders. Founded in 1974 by Muriel Folliter Phillips, who passed away yesterday, Barbara Henley, and other pioneers from this congregation and elsewhere. I continued as an executive or program director at other local agencies, learning about nonprofit leadership, fundraising, and board politics. As Karen's career at MD Anderson advanced, where she's a professor in the Department of Behavioral Science and director of the Center for Energy Balance in Cancer Prevention and Survivorship, couldn't pull it off in one breath, we created my best job ever, stay-at-home dad. Which leads me, thank you for your indulgence, back to Emmanuel and our relationship. As some of you have done, I first became involved wherever our daughter Emma was at the time. From those early years through bat mitzvah, confirmation, and Helfman graduation, Emma learned from so many of you. With no personal aspirations and limited Judaism chops, I volunteered, a sweat equity contributor. Along the way, Karen chose to convert. I sold Purim Carnival tickets, kept the PTA books. With Stuart Gaylor, I worked on the leadership committee and conferences, and spent time on budget and finance, audit, and eventually the executive committee. Then I was asked to become senior vice president, which caught me completely by surprise. From baseball and Judaism, we need to keep practicing, trying, dedicating ourselves, spending time in community, and bringing energy and enthusiasm to all we do. Fortunately for me and our congregation, Rebecca Lundstreth agreed to be president. After a long conversation with her, I believed I could apply all that I had learned and learn how best to apply it by observing and supporting Rebecca's remarkable leadership. I will always be grateful to Rebecca for her encouragement, openness, and patience as I shadowed her. I was extremely privileged to be appointed by her to lead the team that was the Rabbinic Search Committee, a transforming experience. That's how we came to be together here today. What's next for us? Let me spend just a few minutes on my vision as president, with a caveat that this too requires a team. As I see it, there are three areas of focus: our short and long-term financial health, governance, and member engagement. They are inextricably intertwined. We must be adequately funded, well-run, and all be involved. Success in one quarter will depend on success in each of the others. Regarding our financial health, any board's primary responsibility is fiduciary, ensuring the financial health of the organization, and that expenditures are appropriate and in line with the organization's mission and goals. Our board's process of ongoing budget oversight and careful budget development will continue with the valued and exceptional support of our executive director and staff. With respect to governance, to ensure spending is goal-directed, we're following through on the governance task force report that was adopted by the board at our retreat last summer. Rebecca appointed the bylaws task force with Stuart Gaylor as executive committee liaison and Elizabeth Crone, Ben Miller, Rick Oshman, and Ellis Tudson. We intend to modernize our bylaws and more effectively organize our board, executive committee, and committee structure to identify and carry out our mission and to encourage broad participation. Once the task force completes their work and the board has reviewed proposed changes, you'll begin reading about and have opportunities to understand and comment on and ultimately vote on the proposed revisions. Member access to, input into, and engagement in our committees and programs is the final, not the least important element. Our revised bylaws will encourage increased committee membership, amplifying membership's voice in what we do. We will plan and provide both continuing and new opportunities to worship, learn, play, and grow together. Continued outreach to potential members can strengthen both our friendship bonds and financial base. Looking to our long-term financial well-being, we have just been approved to participate in the Houston Jewish Community Foundation's Legacy Program. Soon you'll begin hearing about legacy gift opportunities that will strengthen our endowment fund, on which much current and future programming depends. Both Rabbi Walter and Myra Lipper, who established so much of our current endowment, are involved, as well as Jerry Amundsen. I'm grateful for their expertise, and to Elise Kalmans for leading this effort. Finally, I am continuing to raise funds to hire a development director to enhance, manage, and coordinate fundraising and gift stewardship. Working with Rabbi Hayon, other clergy, the board, and our members, this professional will help us realize the revenue we require to continue our tradition of excellence and community leadership. The Cantor search has entered its final phase, and I hope to have an announcement for you very soon. It all may sound ambitious. Speeches like this are meant to reassure the listener that we're in good hands and as an opportunity to issue a call to the future. As a friend recently suggested, there is a certain similarity in installation rhetoric across the years. Still, there is truth in the suggestion that we can accomplish much if we contribute, each of us, what we can. Rebecca wrote in her final bulletin article as president, "My challenge to you going forward is to rethink how we go about becoming a stronger, more vibrant community." I want to reframe that challenge as an invitation. How can we take this relationship to the next level? Have you examined how Emmanuel provides meaning to you? What might enhance your relationships with one another and the congregation? I've been direct with you, and I'm truly optimistic about our future. Now it's your turn. The Jerusalem Talmud tells us, "Who occupies himself with the needs of the community is as though he occupies himself with Torah." Take the next step. Your response to opportunities that will arise to volunteer your expertise, your time, your participation, and your financial support will be rewarded with a stronger and more spiritual community. How can I be certain? Because we are ever building on the legacy of our Judaic and congregational ancestors. A final quote. Baseball is also about memory and about creating memories. Zikaron, remembrance, is inherent in Judaism. I could not stand on this bema again to envision tomorrow, nor could we dwell in this beautiful sanctuary that feels so much like a home without acknowledging our debt to our founding families, our extraordinary senior rabbis and clergy, and the lay leaders and staff who brought us here. In the parlance of our time, we belong to Emmanuel. Let us move our temple forward together so Emmanuel becomes more each day the place where we belong. Shabbat Shalom.
Jeff, thank you for your leadership and for your teaching and for the vision which will lead us forward into the next very exciting stage of our history as a congregation. I want to invite you up with me to receive a moment of blessing before the open ark. So while the two of us head up to the ark, I'll invite the congregation to rise, please. It's been a few years since you stood here at that morning of your bar mitzvah, getting ready to receive the inheritance of Torah that is yours as a Jewish man, a member of the Jewish people and of this congregation. And your story about that moment and that morning that was so pivotal in the story, your autobiographical story as a member of this congregation, reminded me of a moment. One of my first Shabbats here at Emmanuel, I was sharing this bima with a bat mitzvah, and I placed the Torah scroll in her arms, and I said, "How does it feel?" And she said, "It feels heavy. It feels good." And I think she offered me that morning a pretty powerful illustration of what Torah means to all of us, but also what Jewish life ought to mean to us. That there is something that feels important about carrying something heavy. And sometimes the goodness is what makes the heaviness worth it. But the fact that we're carrying something heavy tells us that we're doing something holy. I spoke in my bulletin article this month about that moment of conversation between Moses and his father-in-law when Jethro is advising him about the principles of thoughtful, strategic, effective leadership. And Jethro also talks about that feeling of heaviness. And he says to Moses in a tone that sounds a bit foreboding, "Ki kaved mimcha hadavar," this thing is too heavy for you. It's a word of warning and a word of caution, but it's also a word of encouragement, because Jethro finishes by saying, "Lo tuchal la'asohu," you can't do it, levadecha, alone. The heaviness of this tradition, the weight of these teachings, the weight of expectations and leadership and of a future that calls to all of us can feel overwhelming at times. But Jethro's promise to Moses is also this Torah's promise to all of us, that the things we're carrying feel heavy, but we can always do it. We can always lift them, and we can always bear them forward if we remember that we are not to do it alone. This congregation, its clergy, its officers, its leaders, and its members are here to share the weight of this tremendous community and its awesome responsibility to our community. They will help you. I will help you. We are all looking forward to carrying some small measure of the great and holy weight of lifting these words of Torah and lifting the mantle of leadership of this great congregation as we move forward together. And so, it is my privilege now to offer you words of blessing that come from the very heart of this Torah scroll and the center of our story as the Jewish people. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May the light of God's countenance shine on you and be good to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yisem lecha shalom. May God's presence remain near you. May God bless you and your work with an enduring sense of wholeness goodness, and peace. Amen.
Amen.
Mazel tov.